Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me once again in Itoro's Hub. My name is Itoro Jimmy. So, once again, we're here to discuss some exciting and informative topic. And today we'll be talking about, we'll be looking at the topic: are athletes born or made? And of course, I always like to bring to you people that guests that are very very well informed on this topic. And today, my guest is none other than Wole Opatola. Wole is a renowned sport journalist and he's also the coaching instructor with the Football Coaching Association of African Nations. You're welcome on the show, Wole.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. It's great to be here on the show with you, and good to see you again after so long.
Yeah, it's been ages, really. It's really been ages we've seen each other. Thank you so much for coming. I was really, really excited when finally I could, hold you down to say, please, this is the time you need to come, let people know what is really happening out there. I mean, there's so much speculation about the topic we'll be discussing today, and I'm really glad that you are the one handling this. Okay, so well, let's start by this. What is the job of a coaching instructor? What's the difference between being a coaching instructor and just being a coach? What's the difference?
Okay, let me just say it in the simplest terms. Let me break it down. The late Yemi Teller, well, may he continue to rest in peace. For many years, for many years, was a coaching instructor at the Nigeria National Institute for Sports (NIS) in Lagos for many years. And eventually he was given the job of the on the 17 side, the Golden Eaglets, and he was the one who handled the team. We won gold. We defeated everybody at the 2007 edition of the Under 17 World Cup in South Korea. So that basically is the simplest way I can explain to you the difference between a coaching instructor and a coach. The late Yemi Teller, for many years, was responsible for producing football coaches for Nigeria and beyond, and many coaches actually passed through him at the NIS. So it means that he was a teacher, a great teacher, a producer of talent in terms of coaches, but eventually he was given the opportunity to go express himself, not only for Nigeria, but before the very world. And we became good at it. He actually went into the field and showed everything he's been teaching in the classrooms. And he led Nigeria to the 17 World Cup to become champions in 2007.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So let's dive into the topic of today. With your years of experience, would you say that athletes are actually born or they're made?
Athletes are born and athletes are made. So that's just it. Athletes are born and they are made. You might want to be tempted to say it's 50-50, although research has shown, I'm speaking now as a researcher, research has shown that the genes, that you inherit from your parents or from your parents' actually put you in good stead to becoming athletes if they were athletes themselves. So it's like already you have like 70% comparative advantage over others. So the remaining 30%, it now comes from what is known as external factors, environmental factors. So that is why I can explain to you now that athletes are born and they are made. Genetically, they are born, and with the external factors, the environmental factors, which accounts to 30%, they are made. So 70% being born, 30% being made.
Okay, so who can we say is a natural athlete? What makes a natural athlete actually?
Okay, from the explanation, I will take it from the genetics, and I will also take it from the external factors, the environmental factors. Basically, genetically speaking, you have the ACNT3 and the ACE genes. These are responsible for muscle building. We're talking about strengthening of the muscle. For you to be an athlete, you have to have strength in your muscles. So that's why you see that athletes usually appear different from every other individual in terms of body structure, body shape, and all. When you see somebody approach you, with a protruding tummy, the one we call pot belly in this side of the world, and all, you
Yeah.
easily will say, yeah, you easily will say, oh no, you are not an athlete. It's very difficult for the person to convince you that he or she is an athlete, because the number one characteristics, you want to see extreme line body, you want to see a muscle tone body, with the kind of things we call six packs, for guys, which you also see in ladies. Exactly. When you watch out for ladies who are competing, who are presently competing, who are still competitive, you discover that you see them bring out muscles, things like that, and the feminine nature is somehow eating, but it's only for that period while they are training. Trust me, once they stop competing and all, the usual feminine figures and all, characteristics and everything will come out. But at that moment, all you see are muscles, biceps and all. So this is one area where you actually differentiate an athlete from every other individual. The first thing is to have the skeletal support, the muscles strength, the muscles in the skeletal part of the body being strengthened. So when you say they are born, most of them are born with the gene, the ACNT3 and the ACE genes, so they come naturally. They help strengthen the muscles, build the muscles to be competitive ready, to be action ready. So you are talking about a situation whereby you are already born an athlete, either because your parents were athletes, your parents, it runs in the family, just like, for example, you might wanted to be you might tempted to say that obesity runs in the family, so when you see them, they appear fat,
Yeah.
chubby, sometimes, overweight and all. They say, oh yeah, I think I resemble my mama, I think I resemble my papa, like you say in this side of the world, that kind of a thing. Although research has also shown that, sometimes when you say obesity runs in the family, is because nobody is running in the family, so, but basically, these are characteristics that are,
That's
yeah,
what you said.
exactly, these are characteristics that tend to be inherited, so once you inherit that, then you are already born an athlete. You already have what it takes to become an athlete. Then you now ask, what are the other things that will now help you finally become the athlete? These are the external factors. The external factors are the environmental factors. Coaching,
Yeah.
number one, because you can't coach yourself. It's very difficult for you to be the player and the coach at the same time. You might
Sure.
later become the coach in later stages of your career. That's where you say somebody is a coach player, But at that point, you are talking about somebody who's already near retirement, who is already looking at the future and is saying, okay, I got a future in coaching. So number one is coaching. Is the environment ready for you in terms of providing you the coach and the coaching materials, and that's the second aspect, because apart from the fact that you already have a coach, the coach will not work with his bare hands. The coach has to have equipment, the coach has to have facilities, the coach has to have tools, so is the environment providing you with the coach and coaching materials, and then because number one, you got the talent, which is the most important thing, talent, but the talent wouldn't just go and prepare itself or appear by itself in a tournament. The coach, the coaching instructions and all, and the funding, because of course, sports, involves a lot of funding and all. That's why you see that these athletes go for grants, funding and all. Then you now start talking about how rich is the state you are representing, the country you are representing. So this, I'm already going into external factors, which I think we still got time to explain.
Yeah. So, while you're talking right now, you mentioned talent. We've had situations where let's say, for instance, we have great footballers in this nation whose children has tried to, kind of follow their footsteps, but they've not been able to, live up to the expectations of their father and even the entire nation at large. So can we say that the talent is kind of the reason why they didn't meet that standard, or that they don't have enough athletic genes, so to speak?
Oh yes, thanks for that. That's a very good question. Basically, you have to first of all reason with me from all I've been saying. You know that when you are born into that kind of family, genetically you are already an athlete. The genes are already kind to you in the sense that those things that are inherent, in your family, that's from your father, your mother, your brothers, your uncles, your sisters, your grandmothers, and all. Nature has been so kind to you that you have already been blessed with it from heaven. So the rest is the external factors. Now let's look at sports, which is the reason why we are here. Look at the world of sport. In boxing, we have the Mayweathers, we have the Spinks.
Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather Senior, was a fantastic boxer, in his own 80s. He had about 26 wins, 6 losses, about 28, 26 wins, 6 losses. Then he gave back to Floyd Mayweather, and Floyd Mayweather continued from where his father stopped. He became a world champion.
So yeah.
But do you also know that Mayweather's uncles are also boxers? Jeff and Rogers, great boxers, at their time, and they also later became coaches, trainers to Floyd Mayweather. So you're talking about the Mayweather family, sports running in their family. Most of them
Yeah.
predominantly boxers. Then you look at the Spinks. Michael and Leon Spinks, were great fighters. In the 70s and all. They won gold at the Olympics. Then they went on to become world champions. I mean, it's not every family that we boast of people that defeated Muhammad Ali and Larry Holmes, through their career. But do you know that Leon Speaks gave back to about three other children of Leon Speaks. Also took to boxing. Leon Speaks Jr. And one of them who tragically died in 1990, when he unfortunately ran into a gun shooting incident, and he died in 1990. Calvin, Calvin's Spinks. He died at the age of 19 in 1990 after he had tried his hands in boxing. So if not for death, he would have gone further. But he had a son. He left behind a son at 19. And that son, Leon 3, is actually also a boxer right now, in his 30s, and he's also a boxer. So you're having first generation, second generation, third generation. Yeah, they are boxers. It happens everywhere. In tennis, we have the Bryan brothers. They're actually twins. Identical twins, and they took the world of tennis by storm. In fact, in the open era, no tag team in the men's doubles, has ever won more titles, than the Bryan brothers. The same thing. We have the Babas. They are identical twins in the NFL. That's TK and Ronde, and you have them everywhere. In football, you have the Maldinis, Cesare Maldini, then Paolo Maldinis, and the rest. There are about 5 of them, in the Maldini families. They've taken to football. Everywhere you go, there is the family of boxers, family of footballers, family of tennis players, Venus and Serena Williams, family of handballers, this and that, So basically, these things just didn't happen by chance. It happened because of the gene, that they all share, Then the external factors. Okay, now let's look at basketball. The Corys. The Corys, the father Dell, the mother Sonia. Dell was a great basketballer at Virginia Tech University. Sonia was a great volleyballer at Virginia Tech, and they gave birth to children that took after basketball. Seth Curry, and all, and despite the fact that they all went to Virginia Tech, One of them who ended up playing in the NBA didn't even get a scholarship at Virginia Tech. Yet he became a great basketballer in the NBA. The external factor wanted to deny him the opportunity of going to sports, which was the scholarship that he was denied as at that time. But because of the gene that was predominant, it just couldn't stop him. The minor hiccup, the minor setback as at that time couldn't stop him. He kept at it.
Yeah.
And today, he's one of the greatest basketballers, to have graced the world of the NBA. So these are the things, these are examples to show to you that on one hand, you have at least been born, and on the other hand,
Yeah.
you have at least been
You
made.
need to go.
So yes, you have to come to a situation here in Nigeria. Oftentimes without the talent, but the developmental stage is the problem, is the issue. Unlike what you have in the developed clime, in the other clime, in Europe, in America, even in some certain parts of Africa here, when you go to South Africa, you go to North Africa and all, where you have the facilities, every street corner, you have a playing field, you have a stadium, you have a practice pitch, you have everything. Unlike here in Nigeria, whereby even those days, the practicing pitches, the public sports arenas are being turned into residential buildings, residential areas, and all.
Mhm.
We're talking about external factors denying the talents the opportunity to grow. They say that for everyone, Ahmed Musa, there's about 100 there in Kano. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, so basically that's what we are talking about. So being born an athlete is one. Being able
Yeah.
to develop it from the environmental factor is also another. So these are some of the explanations that I've given so far.
So what can we do differently? Because like you rightly mentioned, talent is on one hand, but the environment largely contributes to this to the expression of this talent and even discovering this talent. So what should we start doing, differently to help improve this talent hunt?
Well, basically, in this climb, we still depend largely on the government.
Mm,
Um, yes, we have been lucky with some corporate support, over the years. Yet, you will agree with me that everything still lies or depends with the government. First of
mhm,
all, we have to go back to the community. There has to be community development, grassroots. We just have to go to grassroots training. I have been through some level of coaching development with the Scotland Football Association. I have been able to go through some level of coaching development with the United States Soccer Federation and FCAAN that I represent at the moment. That's the Football Coaches Association of African Nations. You know, every training that we've gone through has got to start from the grassroots.
mm,
You know, everything start. Look, when you go into training either with the Scottish FA, the United States Soccer Federation, FCAN, you know, they first start by showing you pictures, images, and videos of great talents, across the
true.
world, in different fields and all. But do you know how they sum it all up? They say it all starts from the grassroots. It all starts from here.
Mm,
So whatever you're doing, first of all, has to be taken care of at the grassroots level, you know. So that's why you see that that's where I'm starting from, the grassroots. We have to go to the communities. We have to go into the zones to fish out the talents. How do we do this? We do this by organizing talent hunts and all. But before then, we have to go back to what we were doing in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s that made us great. Those days, the government pays these coaches and they attach them to the communities. They attach them to
mm,
schools, primary schools, secondary schools, They attach them to the academies. They are being paid by the government. So you don't have to worry about payment, salaries, and all. What they do is that they now ensure that all they do is just go there and work at the community level, at the grassroots level. So you now start, these talents are already there. You start to nurture the talents. That's why you see that in the developed clients, the issues of age cheats and all doesn't come up. Because these boys are already they're already developed and nurtured. You don't have to start going to look for overage athletes, overage footballers, overage this and that because you want to have that advantage over the younger
Mm.
ones and all. No, just let them develop naturally, and before you know it, you start having proper under 13s, proper under 15s, real age on the 17s, on the 19, on the 20, on the 23, and then before you know it, they become world stars, you know. And to a large extent, I think things are changing in Nigeria too, because we have since discovered that, you know, you can cheat today and win, but you cannot continue cheating and be winning. That's why you want to ask yourself a question: is that why is it that Africa is doing well at the under 17 and under 20 level, yet we have refused to graduate, and see the same level of achievement at the senior level? I mean, to date, the highest Africa has ever achieved, at the Senior World Cup is a quarterfinal finish, which has been
Yeah.
achieved by Cameroon, Senegal, Ghana. Nigeria is even yet to achieve a quarterfinal finish at the Senior World Cup. Despite our achievements at the Under 17, we must have won the Under 17 like about 5 times. We've played in the final of the Under 20 World Cup about 2 times. Ghana has even won the Under 20 World Cup. Cameroon has won the Under 23 gold at the Olympics. Nigeria has won the Under 23 gold at the Olympics. But what is the success so far recorded at the Senior World Cup? We're yet to see an African team play to the semi-final level. We are yet to see an African team play to the final level. IS is the quarterfinals, and it's just 3 nations. Egypt has been to the World Cup, Morocco has been to the World Cup, Nigeria has been to the World Cup, Angola, several other nations. So why is it that we are finding it difficult at that level? It's not that the talents are not there. After all, you have Nigerians all over the world. Watford right now has about 5 Nigerians. Oganeka Retebo just joined up. There's Tom the Daily Tom Dollar or something. There is Isaac Success. There is our central defender there. About 5 of them in Watford alone. Playing in the Premier League, and in the Premier League alone, you also have Ndidi, Iheanacho at Leicester City. You have Iwobi at Everton. You have a host of them. Everywhere, even in the Italian Serie A. We had Simi Wanko scoring from nowhere. Even despite playing for a low-level club side in Italy. We have our boy blazing the trail in Belgium. He was the highest goal scorer in Belgium. We have our boy in America, highest goal scorer in the Spanish Secunda. You understand? So the talents are there. So now you want to ask, what is stopping Nigeria? And that is the external factors that I've been talking about. Do we have the coaches right now? Do we have what is their level of exposure? What is their qualification? Do we have the equipment? The other day we played against South Africa a few years back. We had to use balls brought in by the South African contingent. Because we didn't have balls. What a shame. And were you surprised that we were beaten at home? Why not? We were playing with balls from South Africa. How do you expect to beat them? When you are playing in your own hometown, in your background here, and yet you have to be soliciting for balls from South Africa. I mean, that's a big shame on Nigeria. Where is the facility? Do we have? Look, do you know how many times we complain about the grasses, that they are not growing well, that they are not the right grasses to be used for football matches, and all? Do we know how many times we complain that the flood lighting is not working, or they are not the right specifications and all? These are factors that affects your athletes when they go abroad. These are definitely very serious issues that you just have to address. The Nigerian team is going to the Olympics, and right now this is the time now that they say that they are flying to this place, they are flying to that place to get some exposure. At what time? When some athletes have been there for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Look, I was in London, for the Olympic Games in 2012, and you know what? As the games was getting to an end, they were starting preparation for the next Olympics 4 years time. You know,
Hmm.
so they were already mapping out strategies on sending out the athletes to everywhere. Look, they know that in boxing, for you to be great boxers, you go to Cuba.
Yeah.
Cuba is the headquarters of boxing. You send your athletes to Cuba, let them go spend 6 months, 1 year, 2 years in Cuba, learning the ropes, learning how to box. When they come back, definitely with that kind of exposure, when you have people go to Bulgaria, I mean, they go to Russia, they go to, you give them grants, say go there, go and learn how they do it. Go learn how they do taekwondo. Go learn how to play ping pong in China, and everywhere. These are the ways for success, panacea to success, I know. Oh my gosh, it's all right. I can go on and on, trust me.
Honestly, you've been. That's why I didn't want to interrupt you, because you really opened. Should I say opened the can, and you picked everything out one after the other. Honestly speaking, I had a guest here some weeks back, and just like you hammered on grassroots development, he was saying the same thing. I mean, we need to go back to the drawing board. There's no doubt about that. He was even talking about, same thing you just mentioned about community development. That why can't we, invest in places like Row Park and the likes? There are people who go there, and I told him, I know these things happen, and until we start, looking at that, going back to the drawing board, like you rightly said, we still have a very long way to go. So you mentioned actually that then the government were paying coaches, to train athletes in communities and all that. They didn't have to worry about their salary or any form of payment or anything at all. So I want to ask, what does FCAAN do? Do they have any form of partnership with training, aside from training coaches? Do they have any affiliation with grassroots development and the likes?
FCAN is registered in the United States of America. FCAN has headquarters, in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania, United States of America, and you know, we have FCAN basically being run by Nigerians, with some Africans, and the founder of FCAN, thank you, Isabella Ikoma. We have Emmanuel Babatunde Egwauje, who is right now a consultant with the Nigerian Football Federation on coaching. He started FCAN, somewhere in his apartment, in 2006 in America, and Babatunde Terry Egwauje is a Nigerian who went in search of football development, in the United States of America. He grew up here in Nigeria, here in Edo State, Benin City here, and he went into coaching, when he suffered his split shin, in America playing football, and that was the moment that gave back to what we are or where we are right now. He went into coaching. He's got about 26 different coaching badges, and all. And he decided to start a movement known as FCAN, which, we have, the likes of Coach Henry Abiodun, who is the overall head of coaching, here in Nigeria. We're talking about somebody who's been into coaching in America, in Turkey, everywhere. He's done it here in Nigeria, here with Sunshine Football Club and all that. That has given back to FCAN all over Nigeria and in different parts of Africa, in Liberia, in South Africa, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in everywhere, in the US, in South Africa, and all. So what we do basically is that we are involved in grassroots coaching and development. We develop coaches, we train coaches, we bring up coaches, and they go through the rudiments of coaching development from the grassroots right up there till they become pro. It's just like, my first coaching experience was with FCAN when I went for FCAN E&D, in Ibadan, in 2019, 2 years ago. And that opened my eyes into the world of coaching, and since then, I've undergone coaching developmental courses with the Scottish Football Association, like I said earlier on, with the United States Soccer Federation, and
Yeah.
it's all about grassroots, you know. And from there on, you talk, and they do the same thing in Europe, whereby you start graduating from then on. You start with introduction to coaching, for example, the coaching, the pathway, in Scotland, with the Scotland FA, you start with they first take you through the mental awareness,
Hmm.
in football coaching, then you now do other grassroots coaching, then you now go into the introduction to coaching proper, then you now go for certificates into youth and adult coaching,
Yeah.
before you now go into the Scotland C, which is the equivalent of UEFA C. Then you now talk about going to B and A and all, and that's exactly the way it is with FCAAN. You start with you start at F, from F you go to E, from E to D to C to B to A, then you go to the pro. So you don't just become a coach overnight. You have to go through the necessary training before you become a
I
certified
wanted to even
coach.
ask that. What are the requirements? Can anybody can I just wake up and say I want to become a coach tomorrow and I will be accepted?
Oh, basically, oftentimes you look at what's your antecedents in sports. Yes, you can say yes. You can wake up and say you want to become a coach. That's why you just have to start from the very beginning, which is from grassroots coaching. For example, from FCAN, you start from F, and all. But like it's done all over the world. They also consider your antecedents in coaching. That's why they look into your CV, your resume. They look at your participation in football. Have you been a coach? I mean, have you been a footballer at a point in time in your life, in your career? That determines the level where you start from. So if you have been into sports, it's like you already have an head start. You are starting ahead of others. But eventually everybody comes to meet at a point, because the progression, is systematic. There's a pathway. You don't just jump from F to A, or from B, from D to B or something. There's a pathway. You understand? And everybody meets at that point in time. So that's why you have to also look at the situation whereby you must always go for qualified coaches. Just like it is done in America and every part of the world. You can't just jump into a profession. You must
Hmm.
go through the rudiments. Look, if it is pure water you want to sell, it's fine. There's nothing wrong in selling pure water, but you must go through the necessary training. However short the training is, 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, you must go into some form of training. You must be trained and you must be certified before you can be allowed to go into that aspect. And that's the same thing with coaching, FCAN in football, and of course some other coaching pathways in some other sports that we've been talking about.
So in other words, we could just put it down to our topic of the day. We can say coaches are made, are not born, right?
No, 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 no. Don't get me wrong. I told you that, like I said, athletes are born and athletes are made. Coaches too can be born and coaches too can be made. You've seen situations whereby you see a coach and they tell you, yeah, his father too was a coach. His father too was an instructor. It's what I mean. Apart from the fact that some athletes eventually become coaches, we've seen people become coaches because because their parents were coaches. You understand? So they are born and they're also made, and that's when they go through the training. That's when they go through the rudiments. That's where they go through what it takes. The schools and all. Just like we are here, just like Itoro Jimmy, you are a great journalist. I mean, you didn't just wake up to become a journalist. At least I knew when you were going through mass communication training and all in the higher institution and all. And today you are one of the best around. If not the best. So that's
Thank
just it.
you. Thank you
To
for
be the
that.
best, you just have to go through the stakes.
All right. So how long will you say it takes to be let's say a fantastic coach? Because yes, it's one thing to go into coaching, but how long does it? How long would that take?
Well, let's say, for example, here in Nigeria, people go to the NIS, the National Institute for Sports. I know that they have some short courses, like 3 months, diploma courses. I know they have some certificate courses. I know they have some courses that runs to 9 months or something, because I've been privileged to see some coaches go through 1 year program and all. It's available everywhere in the world like that also. But Yeah, there are pathways, whereby you go for you start online, you start online, then for some hours, then you go into the field work, 1 or 2 days field work, then you progress 2 weeks courses, 10-day courses, 2 weeks courses, 1 month course, and all, and 6 months course. Sometimes they break it down for you. You come around 2 weeks, you go home, you come around again 1 week, you go home. So it depends on the pathways you want to follow. People also go to the university to study coaching. So they spend 4 years, and they come out with a BSc in coaching, they come out with a B.Ed in coaching. It depends on your pathway, the pathway you want to follow. But trust me, they are all great ways of becoming coaches.
But can you, I mean, from the way you just explained now, can one actually become a coach without, practical? I mean, you're just talking about it theoretically right now.
In coaching, you have to do what you have to do in the classroom, and you also have to do what you have to do on the field.
Yeah.
Classroom coaching, and there's a practical coaching, because everything eventually ends up on the field. But there are different aspects, to coaching that you also have to know. There is the tactical aspect, there is the technical aspect, there is the physical aspect, and there is the psychosocial aspect, because well, uh, trying to take you to school right now, as the coaching instructor, you
Yeah.
know, uh, you look at the physical, the physical aspect of it, which I started with, actually, that for you to be an athlete, you have to have that muscles, that strengthening muscles, that drives
Yeah.
the skeleton, the strengthening muscles and all, and that's the physical area. Physically, you have to tune up an athlete for action. I mean, they don't just wake up every day and say they want to run 90 minutes, they want to run for 120 minutes, they want to go into long distance marathon races. I mean, you see games, tennis actions run into 2 hours, 3 hours, and all. It's
Of
training.
course.
You have to take care of the physical aspect. Then when you take care of this physical aspect, you now take care of the technical aspects, because the players, the athletes, they must have, they must know about the techniques. I mean, Chioma Ajunwa just didn't go onto the field, and leap to a 7.12 jump. There's a technique behind it. To even jump 7 meters, you have to be very, very technical. You have to be at the height of your game. Technically, I'm talking about technique wise. Oftentimes you see people jump to 6 point something meters, 6.7, 6.8. But when you begin to go into the 7.7 meter barrier, at that stage, you begin to dream of a medal. Bronze, silver, and gold. Because look at high jump, for example.
Yeah.
There's a bend to it, there's a technique to it. Same thing in football. You say some players, they say, oh, they're technical players. Say this player, oh no, he's a technical player. It's the technical aspect of the game has to be taken care of. It's when you now do that you now start talking tactics. You now start talking tactics. They say tactics in football. What are they coming out with? Those days we used to say 4-4-2. We used to say 4-3-3. 5-4-1 and all. But these days we start with the goalkeeping. Because now goalkeepers too, they are players. That time they used to say
Of
10
course.
players, 1 goalkeeper. Oh yeah, 10 players, 1 goalkeeper. Now it's 11 players. You're starting from the
Of course.
goalkeeper. So that's why the formation, the formation will start from the goalkeeper. you know. So you say, oh yeah, 1-4-5-1, 1-4-3-3, 1-4-4-2. The one is starting from the goalkeeper because player. I mean, you see, player. That's why you saw that Manchester City, for about 2 seasons, they went in search of a goalkeeper that could play to their style. They wanted a ball playing goalkeeper. So the former England #1 had to be sacrificed, because it's not a ball playing goalkeeper. So they had to go look for goalkeepers that could play the ball, very comfortable with playing the ball with their leg. So that's why they went for Claudio Bravo at the time. They now went for this, went for that, before they finally settled for the kind of goalkeeper they wanted, a ball playing goalkeeper. And you could see that these days they start the play from the back. They play out from the back and all. So that's why they now say goalkeepers too are players. So you start your strategy from 1-4-1-4-4-2, 1-4-4-3, 1-4-5-1, and all. So you are talking tactics right now. Then you now talk about the psychosocial aspect of the game, which is the mental, side of the game. You have to tune up the boys mental wise, psychologically. They have to know that football is a team game. Football has got nothing. I mean, it's not an individual game, and it's a team game. So, for example, when your teammate makes a mistake on the field of play, you don't see footballers stopping the game and blaming themselves on the field. You don't see them say, "Oh no." Immediately, you lose the ball. The game now, the aim now is to win back the possession. So you see that it's everybody's game now. Everybody, look, Iwobi has lost possession, but you can now see that, hey, immediately Ahmed Musa is trotting back to go help back, to fight back and win the possession. Indeed, these are things that have been done in training to take care of the psychological aspect that, okay, listen, we are winning together, we are losing together, and then you also help them tune. You look at how you can tune them to recover quickly after a defeat. How do players react after a defeat? Psychologically, how are they affected? How do they overcome a defeat and know that, hey, we go again tomorrow, we go again next tomorrow? Look at Denmark. Look at the story, the great story of Denmark at the Euro Championship. We saw what happened to their talismanic playmaker, in the opening game of Euro Championship against Finland. Finland when Eriksen collapsed. And you saw that the same team, despite the fact that the game was being played in their backyard, they lost to Finland when the game resumed after the player was taken to hospital. They lost 1-0, and the second game they also lost, despite the fact that they gave a fight, they lost to Belgium, but you could see that from the third game, they won it against all odds, and they were unstoppable. They became unstoppable.
Yeah.
They became unstoppable right until a few days back when they were beaten, albeit controversially, against England.
Very, very controversial. Let's not go there.
That's right. They had to bring in psychologists. They had to bring in psychologists to work on the team, on the players, because they were psychologically down when such a thing happened. Look, the same thing happened to Nigeria here when we played against Sierra Leone in the AFCON qualifiers in Benin City. The moment we lost our boy Oshimen, who plays in Napoli, the moment we lost him to injury, the boys' morale, flew out of the window, because it looked like a nasty injury at first. Of course, it was like that because it kept him out for several weeks, if not months.
Sure.
It looked like a nasty injury, and you could see the boys, putting their hands on the head. They go there to look, and they're putting their hands on the head, and from the bench, they're asking the players on the field, "What's happening? How far? What's happening? How bad? How bad?" And at a point, we were leading by 4-0. And before we knew what was happening, the game ended 4-4.
Yeah.
The Sierra Leoneans came back from the dead, from 4-0 down or something, or from 3-goal down to equalize 4-4 with Nigeria. This is where psychology comes into the game. Look, on a good day, there's no way Nigeria will be leading Sierra Leone by a 3-goal margin, a 4-goal margin, and they will come back. It just would never happen. So something happened at that critical point in the game that changed the whole coloration of the game, the atmosphere and all. That's the psychology. That's what we're talking about, the psychosocial aspect of the game. So you see, coaching. Sometimes when they say, "Oh, why are they paying Genoro such a huge amount of money? Why is Diego Simone any such who just signed another contract? I think 3-year contract extension with Atletico Madrid. Why is he earning such a huge amount of money?" Look, coaching is not a day's job. Coaching is an all-round job, 24 hours job. When you're not coaching on the field, you are coaching in the classroom. And when you're all alone by yourself, look, you are busy from looking at watching tapes of your opponents, trying to look at how to counter their strategies and all. Look, when you have the opportunity to spend some time with Manchester City coach, What's his name again? The Manchester City coach. Look, when he is
Eric.
around you, you said what, Jimmy?
You said the Man City coach, like I said, Pep Guardiola.
Awesome, fantastic, Pep Guardiola. When you find yourself around Pep Guardiola, look, or when Pep Guardiola finds himself around you or in a gathering, look, when for about 5 minutes you are not talking football, he walks away. Pep Guardiola walks away. Everything all his life, everything he wants to hear, everything he wants to say is football.
Wow.
All his life he just wants to. Yeah, Jose Mourinho, when he's not coaching, he's talking football as a pundit on the television. All his life he just wants to be talking football. So as a coach, all your life you just want to devote it to football, to athletics, to basketball. You are coaching on the field, you are coaching in the classroom. Look, in the morning when you wake up, you're taking your team to the field. When you come back from the field, you want to have some classroom sections with them. Then in the afternoon, you want to take them back to the field. Then when you come back, you want to start sitting down, planning strategies for tomorrow's training. Then you want to start looking
Yeah.
at what your opponents are doing, how to counter them, how to do this, how to do that. So trust me, every day of our lives, this is what we live. This is what we live for. This is what we do. And this is where we find our own entertainment. And
Honestly, I like the fact that you actually broke it down because I think sometime last month during the Osaka incidents, about mental health and all that. So we're like talking about, do we actually need psychologists on the team? Can we actually afford to have psychologists on the team? But from what you're saying now, you're saying that the coach actually doubles up as a psychologist for the team. Am I wrong?
oh no, you see, you can never ever underestimate or write off the influence, the role that
Of a psychologist.
psychologist plays in the team. Every team must
Yeah.
have a psychologist. Every team must have a psychologist. Extremely important. I'm talking about, when we talk about the psychosocial development of it, or for example, in a team, you see they have about 4, 5, 6 coaches. Everybody has a role they are playing. When you're talking about the
Yeah.
physical aspect, which is the part of the four outline coaching outline, you have the physical aspect. Don't be surprised that you see a team, they have their own physical coach, you have their own physical trainer. Look, Bonfred Joe that used to be the role of Bonfred Joe when he was working with Clemens Westall, when Clemens Westall brought him to the Super Eagles. Because you see that some players are lazy, they don't want to jog around, they don't want to go. You say, oh, go 10 laps, go 20 laps. They say, hey, coach, hey, coach, hey, coach. They keep complaining. You understand? But do you know that with a good physical trainer, with a good physical coach, you can make them do 10 laps, 20 laps on the spot there without them knowing. That is it. Yeah, that is it. That was what Westall used to say. That, oh no, these boys, you say go 10 laps, go 20 laps. They say, oh coach, oh coach. But when you bring in Bonfrey on the spot, we make them do 20 laps, 30 laps, and they won't even know. Exactly. So you see that this coach is responsible for tactics. This one is technical. Then here is the coach responsible for the psychosocial, for the psychological aspect of the coaching and all. So everybody has a role they play. And you have coaches that are 4-in-1. Coaches that are built. Look, everybody must definitely go through that phase of training. Each phase of training, physical, tactical, technical, psychological, but like you say, division of labor, is always the best. Look at the Italian team. Look at that Italian team at the Euro Championship. Cesar, their coach, who used to play for Sampdoria during his A-days, who used to coach Manchester
Yeah.
City, the present Italian coach right now, Mancini. Mancini. I remember the Mancini Montana combination in Sampdoria in those days. Mancini is there. He played for Italy at the Italian 90 World Cup. There's Gianluca Vialli. Gianluca Vialli also played for Italy at the Italian 90 World Cup. There are about two other coaches there too. One played for Italy at the 1982 World Cup in España, and there's another player, Nicola, what's his name right now? He played for Italy and USA 94, He was even there when they defeated Nigeria. So, you have what you have is, four eggheads, putting heads together to do the job, So, basically, that's it. We also have it in the Super Eagles too. You have Genoro, you have Aloya, who is the goalkeeper's coach. You have Joseph
Yeah.
Yobo. You used to have Salisu. Used to have this and that. And yeah, I know we used to have Robinson Okosu. As a team psychologist attached to the team. I don't know if he's still there or not. So but these are the things that naturally must happen in the game of football.
Yeah. So you have been with FCAAN for how long now?
I've been with FCAN now for 3 years, for 3 years, and
Okay.
it's
So
been yeah, it's been a wonderful time. I
who did you
I I
describe
I
so far?
I was the one who led my team here to the final, a final of the women's Edo State women FA competition, and we lost in the final, to the Edo State
Yeah, I know.
team. Yes, Edo Queens. We lost the final to Edo Queens by 3 goals to 1. And all, but football. That's just the beauty of football. You know that you win today, sometimes you lose tomorrow, and all. And we were very happy, Fortress Ladies to have played all the way to the final of the Edo State FA Cup. That's not a mean feat, and it's no shame, that we lost to the our more illustrious sisters, Edo Queens, funded by the state, and all. And we have FCAN coaches everywhere. The head coach, the present head coach of Edo Queens, Coach Wemimo, is a product of FCAN. Present head coach of Sunshine Queens is a product of FCAN. I'm talking about Sunshine Queens of Akure. Even Sunshine Stars, the male team, it's a product of FCAN. We have FCAN coaches all over the world. The other day that the Super Eagles were in America, our founder, Dr. Babatunde Terry Bauje, was with the team. He was there with the team, handling the technical aspect and all. We have Coach Henry Ayodele, who is the director of coaching. We have great coaches all over the country and outside, in the US, in the UK, South Africa, Liberia, Ghana, everywhere, So we just have to keep doing what we got to do, to help the talents out there, develop. And that's exactly the same way it should be in sports. You could see that the Nigerian team going for the Olympics, you could see the roll call of coaches, Coach Gabriel Okon, Coach this, Coach that. Some of these athletes, they have their own private coaches too, personal coaches, personal trainers, So these things happen everywhere in the world. And that's just the way to develop the talent. That's also a way to help the talent. So
Yeah.
you see that, they said this man is representing Nigeria in this and that. His father used to be this, his father used to be that. Umar, who used to represent Nigeria in tennis, great tennis player and all. His son presently is a tennis star, playing representing the US. He's playing. He was in the he was in one of the Grand Slams recently. Fantastic. He inherited the genes from the father, and he found himself in an environment in the US where they were ready to support the nurturing of the gene, and that's why today he is a fantastic tennis player there representing the US. It's happening in football too. Look at Bukayo Saka representing England. They gave him the opportunity, they gave him the avenue. Look at Iwobi. I mean, they told you that he's the nephew to the great JJ Okocha, and he's represent Iwobi, like the great JJ Okocha has also represented Nigeria at the Nations Cup, at the World Cup,
Yeah.
Everywhere. He runs in the family. So these things usually happens everywhere. They are born and they are also made.
Yeah, of course. I agree with you on that. So if you're just joining us, we're about wrapping up actually, and our guest on the show today has been none other than Wole Opatola, and we were discussing athlete born or made. And from what Wole has said so far, he said athletes are born and they are actually made, and it's actually better if they have an enabling environment to thrive. And of course, he didn't leave out the coaching aspect as well, which is also very, very critical in the life and development in an athlete. Thank you so much, Wole, for joining us today. So tell us, is there something that you have, cooking up? Because I know FCAAN just did a training recently, and I don't know if we'll be opportune to, have such training come up again very soon. I mean, I like the fact that you said we have FCAAN members, scattering around, and I think that goes a long way to answer my question, the
Oh,
question I asked
definitely.
earlier about if FCAAN is actually incorporated into grassroots and that. So tell us, is there
No,
anything
no.
coming up soon?
This year alone, we've had about three different courses. In different places in Nigeria. In Lagos, I think they had the F and the E. But definitely in May, which was about 2 months ago or something, we had the C, FCAN C license in Akure, which was well attended by over 100 coaches, across the country. Recently, we also had one very close to you in Port Harcourt there, where we had
Yeah.
the FCAN E or the FCAN D or something. Yes, the FCAN E training in Port Harcourt, and like you said, something is cooking. Very soon you will also hear that we're also having another training in Lagos and in some other parts of Nigeria. This year alone, we are taking trainings to Kano, to Abuja, so southeast, everywhere. I know one is coming up in Lagos in a few weeks' time, and we'll definitely let you know, and we'll definitely let your Nigerians know.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And well done, because you're doing a really, really fantastic job. It's one thing to say, oh, we need our grassroots to grow. It's another thing to actually put the work to it. And you are actually putting so much work into it. Well done, Willie. It's very, 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 very impressive. So I wanted to give a shout out to somebody out there before I wrap up.
Well, shout out to everybody watching Itoro's Up. Shout out to everybody streaming, watching, and all. I'm telling you, this is a great program. I've been following it on Facebook, and I'm happy. That's I'm a part of it, and I'll continue to be a part of it without a doubt. Thank you very much, Itoro, for having me. You're doing a great job. I hope to see you in the national team. Very soon, someday, maybe as a media officer. Of one of the female teams. The Falconets. The Falcons. And then maybe one day you decide to take to coaching, and we'll see you at the top, Itoro. Thank you very much.
Honestly, that would be a very, very great challenge, because I'm trying to put myself
That's
up
right.
for it very soon. So
That's
thank you
right.
guys. Thank
That's
you.
right.
Thank you, Makuli. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Adebimpe. Thank you, Grace John. And thank you, Ifeanyi Nona, for tuning in and watching today. And don't forget, you can always watch the recorded version, because it's still going to be on the page. And also, I'm going to upload the same episode on my YouTube page, same name, Itoro's Hub. Thank you for joining us once again. And thank you, Wale, for being part of today's broadcast. And guys, don't forget, keep being nice, and until I come your way next time, bye for now.